For this lesson you will need a pencil, coloured pencils, paper and the world map that I will upload onto Seesaw. Hello everyone, I hope that you're all okay and continuing to stay safe. For our history lesson today and tomorrow we are going to be looking at something that lots and lots of you have asked about over the last few weeks, so that makes it ideal for us to cover it, which is all about the countries that were involved in World War II and equally the side in which those countries were on. So our learning objective today is that we're learning to use an atlas so that we can identify allies and Axis countries in World War II. Now, some of you might be sat there thinking, well, I haven't got an atlas at the moment. That's absolutely fine. You'll be able to use the internet and you'll be able to use some of the information that I'll be sharing with you in the slides coming up. Equally, if you have got an atlas at home, that's absolutely ideal and you'll be able to use that. Moving on to our success criteria for today, your bronze is to use the atlas to identify the countries involved and colour code the allies and axes on your map. Silver to label them with the country name, and then the gold to compare the two groups. So for example, what do you notice about the size? What do you notice about the location, the closeness and the amount of countries there? Okay, so to start the session, we're going to have a look at what we already know. For example, what we've learnt about the countries working alongside Britain and against Britain in Dunkirk during the Blitz, and the other points in the war that we've already learnt about in school. So the first question that I want you to think about is, what do we already know about the Allies? Now, the Allies are the group that Britain are in. And basically the Allies are the people that Britain were working alongside. So firstly, what I'd like you to do when I finish this little bit is to pause the video and I want you to write down as many things that you know about the Allies alongside Britain, both in terms of the countries that were allies, but also some of the other information that we know, for example, the different battles that we've learnt about. So if you could pause the video now and do that, that would be great. Okay, so hopefully you've mentioned France within your notes, and hopefully, obviously, you've spoken about the Battle of Dunkirk, which we learnt about last week in school. Hopefully as well, you've made reference to the Blitz and obviously the countries that we know about that Britain worked alongside. I'm not going to give you too much information now because there's a video that you'll be watching later in the session and equally a map that you'll be looking at that will tell you more about the Allies alongside Britain. So moving on to the Axis then, which is essentially the opposing group within a war. So same or similar question again. I want you to have a think about the opposition in the war to Britain. Think about which country was the main country, which is an obvious one, but equally think about the other countries that you know about that maybe worked alongside that country to form this Axis group. Now, when you're doing it, again, think about the different battles that we've spoken about, but your main thing is to identify the country and to identify the people involved in it. Okay, so if you'd like to pause the video now and do that, please. Okay, so within your notes, hopefully you've got that Germany is the main country of the Axis side, and equally, obviously, Adolf Hitler was the main person that instigated that group of countries. Now we're going to move on then from what we already know to learn some new information now, both about the Allies alongside Great Britain and the Axis alongside Germany, and to really look at the kind of how the world was affected by the war. One of the maps in particular that I'm going to show you is actually quite staggering in terms of the scale of it. Okay, so on the screen now there is a video to start that bit of information off with. It's called A Brief Outline of World War II, so a lot of it is information that you already know. There's a little bit in there about the Allies, the Axis, and the countries that worked alongside each other, and equally there's a little bit towards the end of the war too. So I'll add this link to the Seesaw activity. The link's on the screen as well if you would prefer to type it in, but you won't be able to click on it. And then we'll come back together in a moment to kind of go through the sort of things that you've seen within the video. Okay, so hopefully you found that video really useful. I know that certainly to identify the main allies and the main axes, it worked towards that. So the main allies obviously being the United Kingdom and the United States of America and the USSR, which is now known as Russia, and equally the axes, the main three being Germany, Italy and Japan, which obviously probably answers the question that lots of you have been saying within class of how on earth did a country the size of the United Kingdom beat a country of the size of Germany. You can see on the screen now as well. The list of allies and the list of Axis countries are completely different in terms of number. Equally, you can see as well on the Axis list, countries such as Slovakia, Hungary, Romania and Bulgaria didn't get themselves involved in a war straight away. It was after a year or a couple of years that they joined the Axis group. Equally as well, you can see that in the Allies group, a lot of countries were spread right across the whole world. So we've got countries within a number of continents in that list there. I'll let you obviously have a look through them. And equally, again, you can pause the video if you like to try and learn some of them. But you can see the list of allies is a whole lot bigger than the list of axes, which probably does answer the question as to how on earth Britain beat Germany in the war when our country is so much smaller in terms of size. Equally, this world map tells you a whole different story too, in the sense of the number of countries that were involved in World War II and on the side of the United Kingdom as well. This is going to be similar to the task that you're going to produce in the first session of history in the week. So obviously look at it carefully and equally come back to this map if you need to when you're actually completing your work. So you can see the key in the bottom left hand corner indicates that the countries that are in yellow, which is obviously very predominant, you can see yellow mostly on the map, are the allies to Great Britain. So the countries that worked alongside Great Britain to obviously defeat Germany. And then equally, you can see the countries in red, which are generally centrally in the map, apart from Japan over in Asia on the right-hand side. Obviously, a much smaller amount of countries that worked alongside Germany to be able to try and defeat the United Kingdom. So as I said, this is going to be your task to create something similar. I'm going to explain that now, and I'll equally explain what you've got to do as part of Tuesday's lesson 2. So I will upload to Seesaw a map of the world, which you'll be able to use for obviously creating your world map to show the Axis group and the Allies group. Now, in terms of what you've got to do, you can go back to the list of countries that I produced that I showed you on the screen for the Axis and the Allies if you've not written them down, or you can go back to the world map that's on the previous slide to help you. Essentially, you're going to choose two colours. It doesn't have to be red and yellow. It's completely up to you, but you're going to create a key and you're going to mark on the Allies and the Axis across the world. Now, if you remember going back to the success criteria, your silver was to label the countries as well. So whilst I don't expect you to label every single one of them, I would expect you to be able to label some of them at least. As you're doing it, obviously think carefully about how you're going to present it. I know that it can be a little bit tricky, particularly if you're doing it on the screen via Seesaw rather than if you're able to print it out into colour. But equally, as I mentioned, just obviously use the maps that's been part of this PowerPoint presentation to really help you with it. So in terms of obviously presentation, how you're going to do it, just to give you a little bit of an indication, firstly you're going to identify the country. Obviously I'm going to start off with the most obvious for the Allies group, which would be Great Britain. With your coloured pencil, and please ignore my neatness as I'm doing it, you're going to obviously colour in Britain. Yours will be much neater, I'm sure. And there's Northern Ireland. And then you can label it. Equally for the Axis group, I'm going to start off again with the most obvious in Germany. Again, please ignore my colouring as I'm doing it. Oops. Again, yours will be much neater than mine, and then I can label the country. Okay, so that is your task for Monday in terms of labelling the countries to show the Axis group and the Allies group. And then on Tuesday, what I want you to do, again, you can watch this video if you like, use a video from YouTube as well to help you, and use your world map too, is I want you to write at least a paragraph, so at the absolute very least, about what you know from the video about the Axis group and the Allies group as well. And I want you to try and include those words as much as possible to show that you really understand the meaning of them. As I mentioned, if you need to rewatch the video, if you need to use these slides, then that's absolutely fine. But for your Tuesday task, that's exactly what you need to do. That can be uploaded with a photo onto Seesaw, or equally, if you want to type it straight on, then that's absolutely fine. If you could also, for both days, upload your work using the folders and upload them to the history folder, so that when we print these off all together, they can go straight into your history book when we're back in school. Hope that you found that useful, and I hope that you've enjoyed the session. I look forward to seeing your work all on Seesaw later on. Bye bye.